Okay, everyone. One more talk, and then we're done, and we can do networking. Thankfully, not too far behind schedule, but I'm going to try and power through this as quickly as possible. Okay. So, the idea was we'd have two talks from Mercari and then a third talk, but I put out a call and no one answered, so I'm pulling one of my talks out for my reserve. So I've got 20 minutes and 50 slides to get through, so I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible. So here we go. First of all, long time no see. Hi, I've been up here a bit, but yeah, it's good to see you again. I feel like at this point I do a lot of talking about other folks writing code. Like, yep, come to iOS, Tokyo iOS. We talk about code, all the code, lovely code. But I actually do write code. It's true. I also do iOS, apart from talking about iOS. Take a trip down memory lane. One of the biggest things I shipped at Mercari when I was here was back in the day, Mercari had a feature called Mercari Channel. And I implemented a really cool transition animation that when you were swiping through your different tabs of Mercari, when you got to the Mercari Channel tab, it would play a nice, delightful, like interactive swiping animation that would make it really clear that you're going from list item to start live stream. More recently, last year, I worked on the Threads launch, and part of the Threads launch was we had this Easter egg in the Instagram app called the Golden Ticket. The idea was the Golden Ticket was this nice holographic card reminiscent of a baseball card. Be like, here you go, here's your ticket on the way to Threads. And this is something you could like use to get access to the App Store to then pre-order Threads before it launched, which did really well. And then something I do in my free time is I make a comic book app, and I was going to do a talk about this feature of my comic book app where I made a nice, really smooth page scroller. Like a nice, as you can see, it's incredibly fluid, 60 frames locked, interruptible animations. It spreads layout calculations across different ticks of the run loop, so it's incredibly efficient on a per frame basis. And then I pitched that to one of the members of the iOS meetup last year. Like, should I talk about that? And they were like, nah, that's boring. You should talk about this opening animation you made instead. Like, I want to learn about this. Like, I care way more about that than like frame performance. And I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough. I can probably make a talk about all three of those things, and hopefully make it a bit nice and have some nice eye candy, make it a bit entertaining at the same time. But first of all, like, why bother writing like? Yeah, that's the metaphor of my talk right there, I guess. A trash can falling over. Like, well, what is the point of doing these kinds of I guess they're really fancy animations, but why would you bother doing fancy animations when you've got, the system animations? Like, I could have just made the comic open by sliding in with a navigation controller, or alternatively sliding in with a modal presentation. These are both animations that are one line of code. So it's a lot of extra work, and the answer is why bother? It's a legitimate question, especially when you're on tight deadlines. And there's a lot of good reasons. One of them in this case is like wayfinding. You're connecting the previous screen to the current screen with a very obvious transition. And when you exit out, you also see where you went, so you've got very good very good context about what just happened in the app. Another one is this actually lets you hide some background details. Like instead of showing a loading spinner, because opening a comic book takes a lot of effort, right? You've got to open the zip file, which is, decode the zip file and then actually access the data inside it, work out which is the page you need to get, extract that, and then once you've extracted it, convert it from a JPEG to raw pixel data. There's a non-trivial amount of effort that goes into taking a zip file and having it a presentable comic book. And so the idea is, by playing this animation, I can do all this stuff in the background and play a canned animation, and the user thinks it was instantaneous, whereas actually a loading screen. And so this is a term that gets passed around a fair bit now. This is called craft. And the idea of craft is it's basically trying to go through your app and finding everything that feels a bit jank and stuff that could be a little bit better for the user. This is like things like UX enhancements or performance enhancements, things like creating contextual animations, things like making sure scrolling is really smooth and locked at like 60 or 120, making sure that when you tap buttons you get like haptic feedback or visual feedback, things like if you've got animations, like in that case you could tap the edge of the screen and an animation would play, making sure that you can continue tapping that and it will keep going. Like sometimes the screen will be disabled while an animation is playing and users will feel that, so things like interruptible animations. But the idea is basically if you do all this kind of things, you go through and you like find these UX inconsistencies and go through, you can take a functional app and turn that into a delightful app. It's the kind of thing where users will be like, I don't know why, but this app feels really nice. Like these are all tiny little issues on their own that add up to a good app experience. And so back to the page opening animation, like how did I build that? So I have a process. All three things I showed, I have a process I kind of follow. And the first step is I look for reference material. So I was like, okay, I want to make an animation of a book page opening. How do you do that? So the first thing I did is I jumped on YouTube, And the start of the movie Shrek has a book opening. I was like, okay, let's start with the Shrek movie. That's a good place to start. I was like, okay, that's cool. And then I found a Blender tutorial how to actually model a book opening. I'm like, okay, that's kind of hardcore. That might be a bit over the top. And then there's actually an app out there called Smart News. Smart News is another unicorn from Japan that's good friends of Mercari. Smart News has a really cool book page animation in their app. I was like, okay, that's cool. That's actually a good place to start as well. So I was like, okay, so some other apps have done the book animation, and here's what a book opening looks like. So let's go, next step is let's go to prototyping. Now, what is prototyping? Prototyping, there's a fantastic talk on the Apple developer website from WWDC 2014, which is a whole freaking decade ago at this point, called prototyping, fake it till you make it. And the idea that Apple promotes this concept a lot, where it's like, you don't know how an app will feel until you actually hold it in your hands and play with it. So you can try and imagine it as best as you can, but it really helps to have it in your hands and play with it. So do whatever you can to get what's in your head into the real world as quickly as possible so you can play with it and see if it actually works. That could be like make the app in Keynote, or just do what, like, you know, or just draw it on a piece of paper. Just try and get it out of your head and into reality, and then see if it actually works in reality like you were picturing it in your head. So the TLDR is like, go as quickly as you can to try and create the thing you're picturing to see if it's actually feasible. So just for the folks who might not be iOS, the next step was like, okay, so here's the constraints I know I can work with in terms of UI kit. So not to go super, crazy high complexity iOS. Here's what the code you need to make a single UI component, which is a UI view. So let's make a red square. Okay, hopefully this isn't too complicated. Okay, we've got the red square, that's good. Now if we add a blue square as a sub-view, and then offset its origin a little bit, what we have here is we have a red square that is the parent view, and then we have the blue square, which is a child view. And even though the blue view is contained inside the red view, it is actually still visible outside its bounds. But if you then change red view's properties from clips to bounds equals true, now you see that it's the same as before, but now it's actually being clipped by the red view. So what this means is now you can do some cool stuff. Like if I animate the blue view moving, it will actually move, but it's being clipped by the exterior view. And so now if I move the red view along, this goes a bit dark all of a sudden. If I move the red view with the blue view, when did it get dark? Okay, no. Screensaver, I guess. You can see that we actually create this parallax effect, where if one's moving one direction and one's moving the other direction, we actually just create parallax effect. And then hopefully there we go, it's just dark, that's why. And so I was like, okay, so knowing that I can clip a view and then animate the two views independently and create a parallax effect that way, let me go into After Effects with those constraints in mind and see if I can come up with a page turning effect reminiscent of what I saw in my reference material. And so here we go. I was like, okay, so it's just basically what we've got 2 pages below one page, and then as one page slides clipping out of the way, the 2 pages kind of reveal themselves. One stays static. Basically, the backgrounds are staying static, but it's being unmasked, and the front is basically getting clipped at the same time the background is being unclipped. I was like, okay, this seems doable. I can do this in code, probably. This won't take, tons and tons of hours to do. And so the next step is implementation. So I did this in a bunch of steps. Step 1 was, let's work on the background. Let's start with 2 pages in a container, and then animate the left page being clipped away while the whole thing moves into the center. It's like, okay, that works. That looks like a half a book closing. Step 2, okay, let's add in the front cover. The front cover's the other way around. Like it starts completely clipped and then unclips into the center. I was like, okay, now we got a book closing. Okay, that's decent. Are we done? Not yet. There's a bit more we can do here. So when you hit this midpoint, it looks kind of muddy, right? Because there's no separation between the front and the back. And like normally when a book starts to close, you'd imagine there's like some light involved. The background would get a bit dark as like shadows start to happen and stuff. So what we can do is we can add a black dimming view that fades in as the book closes, and we get a bit more 3D depth now as it kind of closes. Okay. Are we done? No, there's this old chestnut, there's one more thing. So we started talking about light interactions all of a sudden. Well, comic books are shiny. If you didn't know, maybe you did. And so now we have the inside is animating like light. Now the fact that the outside doesn't, that might actually feel like a disjoint. So I went into Photoshop and did some crazy Photoshop foo and made this gradient. And the idea was, it's not a completely centered gradient. The idea is it's kind of emulating like how comic books sort of bunch up near the spine and then kind of like taper out towards the other side of the book. And the idea is by adding this gradient on top of it and then animating it independently, hope this works, you can see this, you can see that the gradient adds this like little shine and then actually adds an element of 3D. And then, I'll play that again if you want to see it again. And then the idea is, because I didn't know what to do with it, I just made it like just move out of the way when the animation finishes. And that's it. And so suddenly we have a book closing. And that's it. And then the final bit, there's not a lot to talk about here. Integration is, as you can imagine, you basically just work out you basically work backwards. You work out where the end stage is, and then work out how to like scale down the end state to over the thumbnail that's in the previous view. And then all we have to do is just animate it moving from that point to the center and then scaling up. The one thing to keep in mind is if you set the frame of a view, you'll cause an implicit layout pass, so layout subviews will happen. And if that happens inside of an animation block, that can cause weird things. So what I prefer to do is entirely control the whole thing via the transform property and use like CG affine transform scale and CG affine transform offset. And that means that we don't modify any view, we don't force any layout passes, we just perform the animation wholesale. And then the end result is just, as you can see, we get this. And there we go. That's a very roundabout amount of effort for, ostensibly it's a very simple thing, but when you're working on an app where the concept is reading comic books, this is the sort of interaction users will see maybe dozens of times every session. So it's the kind of thing that if you spend a bit of time here polishing the core part of the app as opposed to, this would make no sense if you did it in the settings screen and things like that. The idea is this is where you can add to the experience of the app. And that's basically my talk. And so in summary, craft goes a long way. Certainly users do notice this kind of thing and it comes out in App Store reviews and people say like the app feels good or works really well. One thing I always recommend is don't try and imagine on your head like what this should look like. Always do some reference research. That always helps. Don't try and just code right away. You can picture I know what it's going to look like. I'm just going to write code and it'll look exactly like it is in my head. That never works in my experience. Always try and pre-visit in some way, either in After Effects or in Keynote. Try and get a design down first and see if it feasibly works the way you think it works, and then build it. And the great thing about software, which I sometimes think we forget, is none of this is finalized. So you can keep tweaking this as you go along. So you can ship one version and you can be like, well, that worked, maybe it could be better. You can ship another version, but don't be afraid to just ship what you have now and then tweak it along as you go. And the main thing is, don't forget to have fun. This is really good fun stuff. This is the kind of the stuff I love to get out of bed for when I do this kind of work. So yeah, don't forget that this is really cool and fun stuff, and you should definitely enjoy it while you're working on it. In any case, thanks for listening. That's my GitHub. You really do GitHubs now, right? Yeah, and that's it. Thanks.